Welcome to Meet the Poet. Today's episode is featuring Milla van der Haaf, all the way from the Netherlands, which is quite exciting. If you have any questions throughout the event that you'd like to ask Milla, just drop them in the chat for her to see. So Milla's poetry is quite experimental in form and dabbles with ideas of histories, perception, and identity. In 2016, her poetry pamphlet called Ghosts of Old Virginny was published, about Virginia City in Nevada. And in 2021, she published her pamphlet Avistamiento de ballenas, which translates to whale watching and is a Spanish-English pamphlet. She hosts an international online poetry reading series called Poetry Lit on the first Friday of every month, and her own work has reached international audiences through publication in magazines in the UK and the US. And now we get to hear some of that work.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so pleased to be able to have you joining us. So the story of you beginning to write poetry is that you wrote your first poem at age 16 in a physics class. What's the story behind that? Was there something just so inspiring in the class? Was it that it was a bit dull and there was nothing else going on?
I wish it was like a really amazing story, but actually I am not really good at physics, so I was sort of struggling in that class. And I had written poems when I was little and then stopped it. And then I think some days before, a friend of mine had sort of written a little poem, and I was thinking like, oh yeah, that's something I did, and I could do that again. And then I was in that class and realized that nothing's going to happen if I keep paying attention because it's not going to do anything for me. So,
Yeah.
and then I just turned to poetry, and I wrote my first like real poem there.
Do you remember what it was about?
It was about heartbreak.
Oh, okay.
I was 16, so
All poems by 16-year-olds are about heartbreak usually.
yes, I think
I
so.
mean,
Yeah,
how has your poetry evolved since then? I guess both in content, but also, style, that sort of thing.
yeah. So I think I started as a 16-year-old poet writing about heartbreak and writing pretty traditional. And then when I went to college, I actually made the conscious decision to study Dutch literature to sort of broaden my horizons for my writing. And I got into contact with all these kinds of writings. And I think the first thing that changed was kind of the content of the poem. And I think you often see that in poetry. So where you start from a really personal level about, oh, I'm so sad and my heart got broken, then you sort of broaden it where the personal meets the general. And I drew a lot of inspiration from mythology. And then the next step was actually sort of also experimenting in form, which is I think, kind of recent for me to do that. And of course, one big change was when I changed from Dutch to English, because I
Yeah.
started in Dutch. That's my native language, but English always has held such a it's captivating. I think it's a really interesting language. I feel really at home in it. I think I'm pretty well versed in English. Was my highest grade in high school actually.
Really.
Uh, so at one point, I started getting lines in English, and I thought let's follow that, and that's when I started writing in English.
It's so impressive that you do write it in English when Dutch is your first language. Um, and I suppose actually, yeah, you said the pamphlet that most of your first reading comes from, Avistamiento de ballenas. It is written in English and Spanish. Why Spanish?
Well, it's translated in Spanish, and I was lucky enough to be invited to a Mexican poetry festival in October 2020. It should have been in Mexico actually, but well, we all know what happened.
Yeah.
So it was online, and so I had some poems translated for that, so that people could actually follow it, and I actually learned to read them in Spanish. And then my co-reader, who actually is a publisher, sent me a message, and he said, "I love what you do, and I want to publish it." So I think I am Dutch, writing in English, but somehow my work speaks to people in Latin America or
Yeah.
like Spanish-based cultures a little bit. And I have to confess, one of my favorite poets is Pablo Neruda, which is also, of course, a Latin American poet. So maybe I've learned something from him that really speaks to people over there.
Yeah, maybe. That's fascinating. Um, so as I said, this pamphlet it translates to whale watching, doesn't it? And that's also the title of the first poem that you'll be reading for us. What relation does this idea of whale watching have to the pamphlet as a whole?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I don't think it really has a conscious relationship. Not that I set out like this is the title poem and the rest is gonna follow, but it has been the poem that was really near to my heart. I really like the poem. It's been the
Mm,
one that I actually can read in Spanish, or I could read in Spanish.
mm,
So it's somehow always been the front poem of this particular set of poems. And
mm,
I think most of the poems in that pamphlet deal with my youth and stuff that happened there, and it sort of is looking at the depths and looking at monsters that hide underneath, or maybe not monsters, but big things. So I think there is a little bit of a relationship with whale watching,
yeah.
and there's a big truck passing. I'm so sorry. So
That's fine. This is the joys of recording at home. You never know what sort of noises are going to come out in the background. Brilliant. Well, okay, I'll hand over to you then for your first poetry reading.
yes, thank you so much. So yes, I want to start with the poems from the pamphlet, and actually the first poem I'd like to read is whale watching. Whale watching, the ocean endless, a friend, an enemy, something you can hold within. Unforeseen, the boat about to turn, all secret, safe for today, when a darkness. From the depths something deeper rises, a mother and a child, a bearing, a mirrored scene. My mother told me, do not point, do not touch the glass, do not leave a mark upon the world until the world leaves its mark on you. My mother told me to catch the whale, you must become still, a monster yourself. You must be made of salt, or better yet, of tears. Become like me, a beacon, the abandoned, beauty of hope, stained, a victim. But when they chained me to the rock, no one said it didn't matter. No one said they weren't proud, but neither did they mention the blessing of being an immovable center held within the rising tide, humid and yet strange, like a great eye, turning, that can't unsee itself or how it drowned. The next poem is also from the same pamphlet, and it's called My House Paints Me as a Mistake. My house remembers a night of stars, but not when I was born, because I was born when the wood curved with rain, and the mice huddled in the cellar to mix their tiny bones with mine. My house has no other story, just the sky trembling with anger against the rafters and her holding out, no matter, say victory. My house thinks I must be an omen of some kind, the ones you read in the entrails of animals or in the flight of birds that celebrate either greatness or despair. Many predictions turn out false, but some are ironic, and that's my aim. To be this sour taste in the back of a mouth as the brink of truth sinks in. A great empire must fall. A great empire must fall. My house can be sure, and so I should stay inside and not consort with barbarians who will turn me, like them, fair-haired and monster-eyed, with a lust for blood and forest wild. I tell my house, when in Rome, and so I strike the battle chord. Each day the capital must burn, each day the geese must come to save me. The next poem is based on the work of Joseph Campbell. He wrote this book about the hero's journey, about mythology, and it's called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And in this poem, I sort of tried to make a kind of a hero's journey for girls. And the title is "Give Me a Thousand Faces, and I'll wear them all." Some go lost, some go other, some go mistaken, some go adjacent, some go firm, some go touched, some go untouched, some go meaningful, some go splayed, some go shipwrecked, some go rabbit faced, some go moist, some go nocturnal, some go swaying in the wind, some go a hanged god, some go pining, some go harvest, some go again and again, some go two-headed, leering, some go a flagship, some go finding the path, some go spiral, Some girl changing mysteries. Some girl has high-rise living. Some girl flattened like paper, like paradise. Some girl on a map. Some girl reloaded. Some girl with some girl. Some girl heart-shaped. Some girl bone. Some girl confessing. Some girl trapped with a soul. Some girl organic. Some girl running foul. Some girl with eyes of honey. Some girl sore. Some girl hunting pole. Some girl come morning. Some girl cash flow. Some girl in the system. Some girl herself. Some girl rain dancing. Some girl flower bed. Some girl parlay. Some girl fearsome, fearsome. Some girl trapped. Some girl misreading. Some girl writing. Some girl a song. Some girl missing the gentlest, the earliest. Some girl winning. Some girl straining. Some girl a mask. Some girl a letdown. Some girl a believer. Some girl moonshine. Some girl, no matter what. The next one is reclaiming me. When I am darkness, dead plan, the wet nail of a nagging promise, fate, misled. When I am other, other with no means other than to be other. When I am a litter of others, the slim train of herbivores, roaming, roaming. When I am ox, but also the slit of the knife against my own throat. When I am bloodletting, guilt-tripping reconciliation with the dark wishes of the gods, wisdom of the crowd, sullen customs of the dead. When I am thrashing floor, when I am root, when I have stained the ground with ruddy sacrilege, when the axe has been blade, and the blade, and the land has soaked me, but never the hands that touched or the mouth that scorned. When I am the fire that breaks the day, cheerful sin, the rising, when I am all everyone ever wanted to be, staying without merit, the clamoring, the serrated edge of a shard. So when I am hide, when I span the breadth of me, when I detain measurement and the merry clashes of will among neighbors, will there be milk? Will there be honey? Will there be scented bread and a clear path at last to a beginning that carries an ending, without being burdened, without crumpling the world into a fist, a raging bull? When I am gone, will there be me, a spark, a breaking, a darkness condescending? And I want to end this section on a poem that isn't actually in the pamphlet, but I think content-wise it really bears close relation to the other poems because it also has to do a little bit about the past and my youth. And it's called My Mother Asked Me How to Leave My Father. It's about the dogs, she says. She sits and she isn't mother, but helpless nonetheless. A divorce is as much about leaving as it is about what you take with you, what you can carry. And it's the dogs. They need homes. You can't leave dogs. It goes against the soul. So you leash them with soft hands. You direct them into kind-natured killing until whatever you are, whatever even matters is that your house has become twilight, a shade of desperation, and they say Cerberus was once a snake coiled around his master's ankles. You see, so many things can be called dogs. Love, for instance, when it's sweaty and pawing your cheek for attention, or when it springs up unawares and catches you in shackles for hands, eager and panting as it spills like a pomegranate at your feet.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. And I think I said this to you already before, but that last poem, My Mother Asks Me How to Leave My Father, is just stunning.
Thank you.
Something that I was just thinking about whilst you were reading was that it occurred to me how a lot of those poems are quite preoccupied with identity, especially Give Me a Thousand Faces and I'll Wear Them All. And I wondered actually if you find yourself trying to be lots of things or lots of people in your poetry, if you feel like you try to or can reinvent yourself from poem to poem. It just suddenly occurred to me.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I think that you actually hit the nail. Can you say this? Or you hit the mark with identity in the fact that this deals with my youth and my relationship with my mother, and identity plays a huge part in that. So, can I be my own person can I be separate from her? And I actually use the poems to sort of investigate that. So the poem which has my house. There's several poems that deal with my house, and of course, it's a little bit of a substitute for mother, and how do you deal with something that encompasses you, and can you be separate from that? So I think, especially for that batch of poems, identity is a strong theme, and of course, I also like to branch it out a little bit. So I'm also thinking about identity as a woman or as a girl. So how much are we allowed to be, and especially in that hero's journey, because I love the hero's journey. I see it in all movies, but it's really a male thing. Like the man sets out and he conquers monsters, and then at the end he gets the princess. And I was sort of thinking, what is it for women, and why don't we have a hero's journey, and we can be so much? So yeah, and I'm not sure if I consciously try to sort of embody identities in poems, because I don't really write persona poems so much. So, but it's sort of each time maybe an investigation of the possibilities of identity, I think. Yeah.
It definitely comes across. And I mean, we'll see this especially in your second reading, but it's clear that you're very experimental with like the look of your poetry. And we talked a little bit about form earlier, but I wondered how you tend to approach the look and form of a poem.
It's part intuition. So I sort of start with the poem, and while writing it, I try to find out where it wants to go, quite literally. And it's also part, I think, thinking about it. So I want the form to be more than just a plaything. So if it doesn't have any function or doesn't make any sense to have it all over the page, I tend not to do it. For instance, in my second part, I'm going to read Oxford Mandarin poems, and one reason to really experiment with their forms is because we have two characters. We have Oxford Mandarin, so it makes sense to sort of try figure out if different spaces on the page would actually help us see those characters. So that is an instance where I try I would like form to match the content in a way without being too obvious, because you could also write like, well, there's this famous example of a Belgian poet who wrote, I think, the word Zeppelin in the shape of a Zeppelin, which was like really fine. It was in 1920s that he did this, but it's a little bit too obvious now if you write a poem in a shape that really echoes what it's about. But there should be some relation, I think, between look and content of the poem. And I try to look for that, but also in an intuitive way, to try to feel out where the lines want to go.
Yeah. How do you think that relates in performance? Because obviously if people can't see the structure of a poem, do you think that then detracts from the work?
It's another interesting question to see how you can bring something of that back. And I think actually the whole pandemic and the fact that we're online opens up new possibilities. For instance, the poem "But Give Me 1,000 Faces," I've used a PowerPoint presentation to take people through the text, and I try to sort of find performance options. So some poems I read with another person to have him maybe voice out some of the words that are on a different space on the page. I actually have a jazz poem where there's 4 voices. So I try. So when you write, you think about form, and then when you read, you have to think about performance. And if you can maybe bring something across, and it doesn't always work. For instance, the Oxford Mandarin poems, I try to read them a little bit to do justice to how they're set up, but it's not the same experience as that you would actually read them. But some poems are maybe better suited for performance, or give you the little bit of extra to bring to an audience when they listen.
Yeah, it does force you to be creative, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's probably time to hear your second reading, where we'll get to hear some of these Oxford Mandarin poems. But the first one is a lockdown poem. So I'll hand over to you for your second reading.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think every poet these days has at least one lockdown poem, and I have actually only the one. This is mine. And I wrote a little note here that says confinement day 23. So that was in April 2020. So I had no idea what was still to come. But anyway, Ghost Town Dispatch. I haven't forgotten about feet or sky or that strange cold when someone passes too close. I still haven't washed my sheets of the smell of you, my town, my glory, my intermediate. The sparrows carrying the dead carry nothing at all. As long as there are holes in heaven, as long as souls know how to return to this, the side stretch of memory. There was a body once, and pigeons and sunlight scuttling through blinds and cracks in the slab. There were games instead of omens, and yelling and legging as oh so many. And there were days worn right down to the bone, and summer dresses that clung to flesh and wind, and knees with scabs and sour breath, and a wild, wild grass that would swallow each unholy thing from your hand. And there were ghosts, sure, simmering like Greeks after an ancient battle, that they spoke my name so friendly like honey, like halva, the kind that breaks on your skin. And then now we move over to the Ox and Mandarin poems, and there are three of them, and they're a little bit longer, so they're kind of little adventures. I see them as that. And the first one is Ox and Mandarin, a Rorschach. Sometimes Ox and Mandarin slow dance till morning, music like a tender cocoon, spinning in the center of their own gravitas. They haven't met, but they hold each other close. After all, what else is life but an elaborate dream of skin? Sometimes there's an ocean called night, and it cradles ox and mandarin. It holds them brazen and dear, sinking them like submarines. Have you ever stopped to consider scrapped metal could hold so much potential? To find a bull's head in a biker's seat, a siren in a distant flute? Sometimes ox and mandarin are stopped in the street, without question, without precedent, or made to hold up their belongings for excavation. An ox has to explain the likeness that centers the rough cave, and mandarin refers to its cousins for trees, and when they reassemble themselves in the dead of what has left them, they always find parts missing. They only have the facts of matter. And yet sometimes ox and mandarin like to rack up a patrol for fun. Then mandarin finds ways to become a clear, visible sun. Then ox in the back studies patterns of knitting and describes them as cars, as suspect destinations, and sometimes ox's horns lit up like half a moon, and everybody knows a new tide is coming, a tide of friendship and ill reckoning, a tide of sullen whispered beauty that no longer needs to be detained to hold true. Sometimes ox and mandarin consume each other like questions, like what allows morning such stellar grandeur. And sometimes ox and mandarin are a tendency to be close, a luminous web of interaction that shows us what we owe ourselves when good faith is lost. Sometimes ox and mandarin are made of the simple light that binds a thought to a thought, and that we call constellation, and they know as foreign guide dogs. And sometimes ox and mandarin consider themselves lucky like that, to have words for things others find missing, because sometimes all ox and mandarin want is to be little gods playing in the still, unbroken field. And the next adventure, so to speak, is ox and mandarin urban legendarium. Most things rise from their own beginning, like night or the frost. Mandarin models a new world after. Here lies treasure. Here a great wave turned counterweight. And here some towns are unbroken, giving rise to a strain of simple nuisance. And quite often ox and mandarin hide there as gargoyles, delighting in their own oratory premonitions, spitting out debris of a newfound latitude, bearing small tidings like gifts, like conjurations of the unseen. And once a girl slept on the street long enough to hear trees speak of celestial longing, long enough to become verbatim again, long enough to wear great shells in her hair and declare herself a child of salt and the petals of spring and demand temples and circular dances on the slopes of Sunday, or even a struggle, as long as it had meaning primarily unguessed at. Often things go like that. One man's marvel is another's leeway, and Ox and Mandarin hold this dear, like the space between two distant suns, because how often can you turn away from something that has yet to form, like mother of pearl, and they know a song is porous like that. Each time you touch it, you change it. And so it is for God, or days of reckoning, or even the string of sister wives running in golden lines across the city like a boundary, a map of lost isles. And that is why often Mandarin consider swallows to be quite ingenious, finding new homes in homes and tokens, carrying a challenge of summer wherever they go. Because yes, some things rise from their own beginning, like doorways, like the secret words ox spills in a loved one's ear. It's simple enough. Decision for each of us. How to spend our hours, how to raise our thoughts. Because to pass from this world is to clear the sky of stars. And even Ox and Mandarin have yet to reveal its counterpart. And the final poem is, of course, Ox and Mandarin, an oral history. No, Ox and Mandarin are broken. Broken like a wheel breaks its trajectory. Broken like a cord, crying for its erstwhile mother. Broken like we are all, broken inside. No, long gone are Ox and Mandarin. Finished like sometimes a breath is finished before you can speak. Finished like a settlement finishes its surroundings into elegy. Finished like myth when it becomes sedentary. This was before the beginning of things, or so the elders say. No, Ox and Mandarin are gone, and in their place only whistling coals remain. Whistling coals and empty hollows. Here be warmongers now, and politicians who mistake their words for vessels of truth. Here wolves have become dogs, a thing of the past. No, Ox and Mandarin find the world soft-shelled and eager to please, with any kind of rhetoric, a shattered place that no fine gold thread can stitch together without missing the frayed edges, the margins of mud and froth and the doomed mentality of the few. No, Ox and Mandarin are tiny figures in the snow globes of each other's minds, the silken prayer that forms between breath and the mystery of sleep, slow motion misunderstanding often found on the threshold of disbelief, a wisp of saliva in a forgotten corner of the dream. Yes, Ox and Mandarin are sacred fire dragons, having been made to see.
Thank you. I love that you refer to those poems as adventures. That's such a playful and it's so full of life describing it that way. Um,
And
and those three poems in particular, the Ox and Mandarin poems, they're very I mean, there's focus on mythology, and they seem very curious about representations of the past. You know, the way you talk about like oral history and urban legends, and your pamphlet "Ghost of Virginny" also looks to the past, specifically American history. And I wondered if why do you find yourself drawn to the past quite often like this?
it's an interesting question because I think it just kind of happens, but then most things that kind of happen in poetry usually happen for a reason. Um, and I think I like I like poems that are full with lots of connections, and then you have to have the past there to kind of inform the present. Because if you only have the present, it's so small. And I think, um, especially the first poem of Rorschach, because I was reading it and I remembered there's this part about seeing a biker's seat or seeing a bull's head in a biker's seat, and that's actually something Pablo Picasso described. So Picasso was able to sort of look at things and see something else. And I think
Mm.
that the past usually um, opens the same kind of quality for us, or maybe should open. So I love when poems and texts are layered and there's all kinds of possibilities. And I think the same goes for Ghosts of Old Virginny. I wrote that in Nevada. I was actually there, and I I was so captured by that town. I was there for to work on my novel, and I hadn't planned on doing anything. Basically, for me, it was just a place to be and not be distracted. And then I suddenly found myself in Nevada, in this old mining town with the history very much alive there, and I couldn't ignore it. And then I tried to, because I thought this isn't my history, so it's a little bit pretentious to start writing poems about the history of this place. But then I sort of mixed it with my own, well, going on there, my own experiences, and then it became a new whole. So I think if you take the past or history as part of something that's also present, so you create something new and very layered, I think.
Yeah. I have one last question for you actually, which is the poem that you refer to as like a Rorschach poem, and I'm assuming that is the Rorschach test that you're referring to.
Yes.
Um, it might be worth having giving a quick explanation to anyone watching who might not know what that test is. But I wondered what you see in the poem as the Rorschach test.
Yeah, so the Rorschach test are these ink blots that I think earlier in psychology they would show you one, and based on your answer they would decide whether or not you were completely mad. I'm not sure if they're used anymore. So I thought maybe, because I think auction Mandarin are really sort of based on, you can see in this whatever you want to see in this, and they, at least for me, they call forth a lot of playfulness and holding up things and looking at them in different ways. So that's why I played with the Rorschach. But
Mm.
I have to confess, if I look at the poem myself, I do see like a blot kind of thingy, but I'm not
Mm.
really a visual person. So for me, it's kind of, I see Oxymandarin when I look at that poem. But I think
Yeah.
the Rorschach comes across in the content of the poem, in that it sort of asks, like, in how many ways can you look at this?
Mm.
Um, and also, I think Oxymandarin are the poems where I don't tend to really write political poems, and I try to sort of stay away from it, because I think there's other people who are more equipped and better suited to speak on that. But when I started Oxymandarin, it was in the midst of the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, and there's a
Mm.
little bit where Oxymandarin are stopped in the street, and they sort of have to explain where they're
Mm.
from, and they're being seen as basically just what they are. And that is my one sort of political thing, like, why aren't we able to sort of look at beyond first impressions, and why are we so eager to sort of pin, oh, this is what you look like, so this is what you are, and this is where you come from. And I think so the Rorschach and Oxymandarin in general are about, well, what more can you see in it, and
Yeah.
can you look beyond the first visual that you get, and can you see a little bit more? Can you see the bull's head in the biker's seat, or can you see beyond the first impression that you get?
Mm. It's so interesting. You've been a brilliant guest, Milla, so thank you so much for joining us on Meet the Poet.
Well, thank you so much. It was a delight to be here.
Thank you to Milla for joining us on Meet the Poet, and to everyone who tuned in at home. Do drop us a like, comment, or subscribe to our channel, and sign up to the poetry mailing list to be notified about all future poetry events. I hope to see you next time.